Having studied feminism in college and film theory, philosophy and textbooks about Marxism and Frankfurt School thought and thinking, feminist ethics with pediatric intensive care, with families and mothers and fathers divorced. There's a benefit, say doctor authors, for the use of an option when end of life must be considered. As an example, with the difficulty with adults, Terry Schiavo and her husband, a patient, Terry Schiavo, her husband, a person who was allowed and approved to make a decision to remove a feeding tube and hydration, causing death. And with consciousness and energy involved, and no agreement with a mystery everyone calls consciousness, the decision ethically by a husband with a female woman significant other does not involve similar feminist ethics, especially with consciousness separate from stimulation. A person seeing the stars, an attending physician flashes on a wall, receiving no squeeze on their hand, from words and language provided as assessment. When consciousness begins to be required, controlled, and decided as a squeeze of a hand or a letter said aloud, and a response to an observation from another human physician, doctor, there's no longer freedom, and rather an explanation for suffering and poverty, drugs and addiction. Gangster thug cartels telling little kids, wives, children, and their clients and their buying consumers, their consciousness needs no input other than a drug they provide. A physician, in other words, has no other options available other than a response a patient provides. Socialism and communism in Seattle and Capitol Hill have similar requirements, processes in their system of control and restriction, observation, and a new psychiatry and psychology called philosophy and theory, shirts and black, ethnicity and race, and worst of all, emotion. Words and language about social. And a freedom they call racist, inconsiderate, colonizing their culture, and a fascist ideology they denounce as invalid. In the context of Seattle and Capitol Hill, arguably, unfortunately, now, a consciousness in a hospital dead has similar characteristics and explainable features as a person who studies pediatric medicine, neurology, in a building with apartments and studios where recovered drug addicts share their feelings. Drug addicts buy their dosages, and large, tall, thug gangster men demand prescriptions need to be filled with no consideration for circumstances different than choices in decision-making called destructive and dangerous, violent, and horrible. A recovered cancer patient survivor who has no story anymore, who has no words, no language, no sound, except silence and quiet, or risk I, thee, now, assault and harassment, bullying and brutality, for a consciousness they share with that fucking nasty, violent criminal who they now say can steal and do as they please within their limits. They observe, they hear, on their land on earth, on their soil, where their white skin has black clothing, their wrinkles have a history and a narrative supported by a hospital and a university where their counselor graduated, in a city where they proudly say, F-U-C-K civilization. They want free services. They want their rights to have no more economics. with their responsibility to cause misdirection and confusion, to supply what they call a beautiful now, an artistic, cultural mystery.